Hi everyone, it's Nick Valentine here from Healing Phase. Thanks very much for taking the time to view this blog. So the topic today is on emotional abuse, and particularly men who are emotionally abusive towards their female intimate partners. I guess why I'm interested in this topic is because more and more I'm seeing it in my practice, not only in individual work but in couples that come for relationship counselling, but also because I see this debilitating psychological effects that it has on women and children. In addition to all of that, we know now that emotional abuse is actually a precursor to serious domestic physical abuse. And so, given it's a grey area and not many people know the signs of emotional abuse, there's a real need to educate the community, but also because if we can get in sooner, then maybe it will help women and children to suffer less and get help sooner, but actually also help men to get help sooner, to be able to make sense of and really understand their behaviour and to be able to do something differently. So if we take the work of Stephen Stosny, he talks about 9 red flags that indicate emotionally abusive behaviour. He talks about how men who are emotionally abusive are very good at blaming their partner and parallel to that, not taking any responsibility for themselves and I guess their faults. They're very resentful in general, and that plays out in their communication, verbally and non-verbally. They often, in that, display behaviours of criticism, contempt, defensiveness and stonewalling, or as John Gottman calls it, the 4 deadly horsemen of the apocalypse, that we know is harmful to relationships. There's certainly an entitlement complex with these men, so this belief that they have a right to be serviced and served and more powerful than the women. And often things like male dominance and male privilege come into that, and that can come from their childhood modelling and certainly the society systems that support that men are more powerful than women, which we're obviously trying to change. They also, linked to that, have a superiority complex, and so that again plays out in thinking that women should do more around the house, for example, feeling that women owe them and should be running around for them, and also feeling like women should cop their abuse, quite frankly. They often can be quite petty in terms of the things that trigger them, in terms of, I guess, what they criticise their intimate partners about, and that can be another sign. The other sign is being sarcastic, often relentlessly so in their communication, and really in a way that leaves women feeling degraded. They're often very deceitful and, interestingly, very critical of their partner and accusatory of their partners being deceitful, when actually they're the ones being deceitful themselves. And often it's also behaviour of being jealous. As I've said before, that links with the insecurity that underlies emotional abuse. And finally, being really pushy. So they're often relentless in making their point. They certainly don't take well to people disagreeing with them, and they will argue until they're blue in the face, so to speak. So their behaviours, if you're a man and you can honestly look at yourself and say that they are behaviours that you're displaying in the relationship, well, first of all, you're taking the first big step. And my encouragement would be to seek help, because there are complex reasons that lead to these behaviours, and ultimately we want to help you guys that do display these behaviours to be able to make sense of them, but most importantly to really deal with the core issues that underlie the behaviours, such as the insecurity, and to help ultimately achieve security, which can then help manifest a healthier relationship with your intimate partner, which is going to benefit them, going to benefit you, and of course, if there's children, certainly going to benefit them in terms of the modelling that they receive. So, I guess from my point of view, there's a feeling for women of being controlled and suppressed. Often the women that I see who have suffered long-term emotional abuse, they talk about losing their sense of self, and often actually feel to blame for that, feeling like it's their fault that they're not the same person they were before the relationship or maybe in the early stages of the relationship. And often that kind of over-responsibility is another sign, actually, in my opinion, that perhaps women have suffered emotional abuse. I think often, particularly when there's children involved, women feel they need to stay. They certainly have a learnt experience that it's not okay to challenge their partner who's emotionally abusive, and so they learn to suppress their own opinions and experiences, which of course becomes entrenched and leads to a lack of confidence and a wearing down of self. So for women and children who might be listening to this and might be hearing for the first time that what we're talking about is actually labelled as emotional abuse, my advice to you is also to seek help, to seek support, to understand the complex reasons that lead men to be emotionally abusive, but also to help heal from it and to help really make decisions about how to protect yourself, but also to make decisions about your future and really how to contact your sense of self, which will come after being able to heal through the debilitating effects of emotional abuse. So I guess I want to keep this short because it is such a broad topic, and I think you could go a number of different ways, but I wanted to just give a broad overview of what constitutes emotional abuse, and I'm hoping that this blog is in some ways helpful for anyone watching this, not to forget the people who might be outside a relationship and looking in, whether it's a sibling or a friend or even your parents, and being able to make sense of the behaviour, but also you might be able to point people who are either suffering this or perpetrating it in the right direction of getting support. And I want to finish on saying that certainly my view is not that men who are emotionally abusive are just monsters and they're just bad people. As I said before, there's often very complex reasons and factors that contribute to why men perpetrate this behaviour. I also want to say this is not at all to dismiss that women are emotionally abusive, but the very real fact exists that men are more emotionally abusive and physically abusive towards women. It is hard to, and actually I will add in this part, that in our system of law, physical evidence, so when there's physical violence, then intervention orders obviously can be effective and the legal system can support women, for example, who have suffered physical violence. But the other issue I see is that emotional violence can be very, very hard to prove. And so it leaves very little, I guess, systemic support for women and children who are suffering emotional abuse. So really the onus is on people who are suffering it or perpetrating it to seek support. I hope this has been helpful for you. Please don't hesitate to get in contact if you have any questions about this topic, and certainly if you want to know more information. Take good care, all the best, and go well.